Nations don't always end loudly. Sometimes they vanish inside routine. One solar storm, one quake, one false alarm. 3 days when America almost disappeared. Wires burned, streets broke, screens lied. The record remains: logs, clocks, letters, instruments. We rebuild each day, hour by hour, what failed first and why, what people did next. Because evidence has a shape. Read the instruments, then weigh the stories. This is the day America disappeared.
Evidence first, stories second. Start with primary sources: logs, clocks, letters, instruments. Rebuild the day hour by hour. Anchor times across towns and traces. Compare accounts to measurements. Mark uncertainty. Leave gaps unfilled. No hindsight, no myths. Disappeared means loss of function. Lights fade. Wires fall silent. Roads break. Systems stop doing the job they exist to do. 3 near catastrophes set the frame. 1859, a solar storm that drove current through wires. 1964, Alaska's magnitude 9.2 and the waves that followed. 1979, a false nuclear alarm inside a live command system. Goals: expose failure chains, identify what held, extract fixes that still matter. Method in 1 line: clocks, instruments, witnesses, then consequences.
If you love evidence-driven mysteries, tap like to log the evidence.
Hit subscribe before the next Phantom Alert turns my desk into a hat.
Drop a comment with your boldest screen slide moment, then we'll test it.
Chapter 1, 1859. Carrington. Wires on fire.
Late August brings a sprawling sunspot visible to the unaided eye through smoked glass. On a clear morning, an English astronomer sketches the group in ink. A sudden flash crosses the drawing like a burn through paper. It is a white light flare, rare enough to enter the record at once. Hours later, the Earth's field begins to heave. Telegraphers notice first. Needles wander on their own. Keys shock fingertips. Dry paper smolders when a spark leaps the gap. Operators disconnect their batteries, and the messages keep moving. Lines carry current induced by the storm itself. Across towns and farms, the wires hum without power plants or dynamos, because none exist yet. The sky provides the push. Aurora climbs far from the usual polar rims. Bands and veils ripple over the Great Lakes and the Great Plains. Crimson curtains hang above the Atlantic seaboard. Reports arrive from the Deep South and the Caribbean. Miners in the Rockies start work before dawn under a light bright enough to read by. Sailors log the glow as a false dawn. Clocks and compasses lose their calm. Magnetometers peg against their stops. Ink traces freeze, jump, and return at angles that make little sense until later. Where stations kept careful time, notes show the storm building after the flare and peaking overnight. Not every town agreed on the hour, but the shape repeats: a fast rise, a ragged plateau, a long fall. Sources are uneven. Newspapers love wonder and alarm. Some accounts grow in the retelling, but the technical logs speak in numbers. So do the letters written by exhausted night shift operators who could not stop their circuits from talking. The match between words and traces is the spine of this day. The mechanism is simple in outline and complex in detail. A solar eruption throws a cloud of charged particles and magnetic field toward Earth. When the field orientation couples with our own, the magnetosphere opens pathways for energy to pour in. Currents surge through the ionosphere and close through the ground. Anything long and conductive becomes part of the circuit. In 1859, that means telegraph wires strung on poles for miles. The failure chain is clear. Long conductors pick up geomagnetically induced current. Insulation meant for small shocks cannot handle sustained surges. Paper ignites. Relays chatter. Traffic stops in places and speeds up in others as lines go self-powered in unpredictable bursts. Messages arrive garbled or early, or not at all. Where managers keep parallel logs, discrepancies widen with the storm and shrink as it fades. A night vignette anchors the scale. One operator writes that the battery sits on the floor with both leads off, yet the sounder taps with each incoming mark. He tries a wet cloth to cool a warming coil.
He dates times and signs the entry, then notes that the aurora outside fills the north like a city on fire. This mixture of procedure and awe repeats across the record. By morning, the sky dims and the instruments settle, only to surge again on the following night as a second wave arrives. The pattern is not a single strike. It is a sequence of coupled disturbances. Farmers talk about red nights. Passengers speak of reading timetables outdoors. Shopkeepers compare compass needles that refuse to sit still. The language of each trade records what it knows how to measure. What holds across sources, the low-latitude aurora, the long lines acting as power sources, the magnetometers that ran out of range. What does not hold, claims of global telegraph failure or cities ablaze. Service was patchy, not universal. The difference matters. It tells how far the system reached in 1859 and where it bent first. Risk today shifts the target from keys and paper to satellites and the grid. Transmission corridors span continents. Transformers sit at the end of lines like lungs at the end of windpipes. Geomagnetically induced current would ride those same long paths, heat windings, and push cores into saturation. Protection has improved, but the physics has not changed. High-frequency comms would fade. GPS timing could drift or drop. A few wrong minutes in the wrong place create cascading confusion. Evidence that anchors this day remains checkable. The sunspot drawings survive. Magnetometer sheets exist in archives with dates and station stamps. Telegraph company circulars discussed procedures for storms in later years, a sign that the problem persisted. Aurora reports line up town by town, along rail lines and rivers. Nothing in this account requires a miracle. Everything in it requires long conductors, a sensitive planet, and a storm with the right geometry. Two lessons close the day. First, length is vulnerability. The longer the wire, the larger the induced current. Second, coupling matters. When fields align, small designs meet large forces and reveal their seams. Neither lesson belongs to the past. Both govern the world that runs on quiet timing and long reach. Day one ends with an empty battery and a clicking sounder. The aurora fades. Ink pens return to mid-scale. Dawn looks like ordinary dawn again. But the record on paper, wood, and glass says otherwise. A nation that had only begun to wire itself learned that it was already part of a larger circuit.
Next, a different force. Not charged particles, but a moving fault. A day when the ground itself pulled systems apart. Chapter 2, 1964, Alaska. The Good Friday Quake.
Good Friday, March 27th, 5:36 in the evening local time. A rupture begins deep under Prince William Sound and runs for hundreds of miles. The duration feels impossible. 3 minutes. 4. Some clocks say more. Floors ripple like water, walls wrench apart, windows turn to grit. Anchorage
takes the shaking on soft ground. Neighborhoods built over ancient clay and silt slide toward the sea. Turnagain Heights fractures into blocks that tilt and drop. Downtown streets split along hidden lenses of mud. Storefronts fold, concrete beams snap at their weakest rebars. Fuel tanks topple, fire follows broken lines and finds whatever can burn. Out along the coast, the seafloor itself regrades. Some shores rise, others sink. Tide flats drown and do not return when the tide falls. Portage drops by several feet and becomes a ghost of pilings and dead trees. Farther out, parts of Montague Island leap upward by yards, exposing kelp-dark rock, now high and dry. The map changes in minutes. Waves come in trains, not once. Local landslides launch sudden walls of water into harbors at Seward, Valdez, and Whittier. Rails twist, cranes fall, fuel burns on the surface of the water and paints the docks in heat. Then, the Great Basin breathes and sends a broader pulse down the Pacific. Hours later, towns in British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, and California count their own losses. Crescent City wakes to the worst of it on that coast. Information routes fail in pieces. Telephone exchanges overload. Poles lean at odd angles. Lines touch where they should not. Power flickers, returns, dies again as plant operators protect equipment. Airfields shut until runways are checked. Roads go one way in bursts when a bridge is judged passable for a single file of trucks. Yet, signals survive. Amateur radio carries voice where wires are down. Ferries reroute by rumor and later by plan. Helicopters take short hops between patches of clear ground. Church basements and school gyms become shelters before any official notice reaches them. Neighbors set the first rules of order because they are already there. Evidence is uneven but strong. Seismograms around the world record a complex signature that fixes the origin, time, and scale. Strong motion instruments were sparse near the fault, but later surveys trace the uplift and subsidence in careful contours.
The failure chain reads from ground up. Underlying geology was the first decision. Delta sediments and reclaimed flats amplified and liquefied. Buildings, not tied to rock, performed poorly even when drawn with care. Bridges and docks failed at their joints and bearings. Pipelines and fuel lines parted where settlement differed across short distances. Fires started not because of one spark, but because dozens found fuel at once. Losses are counted with care and later corrected. Deaths concentrate where local waves hit first and hard, in villages with little warning and few escape routes. Chenega is struck within minutes by a wave that removes most of the town. Valdez loses people to a submarine slide that pulls the harbor down. On the far coast, Crescent City takes damage hours after the ground stopped moving in Alaska. Numbers settle long after the headlines quiet, but the pattern is fixed. Energy stored for centuries, released on a single evening. Notable survivals matter as much as failures. Structures tied into bedrock ride out the motion. Wood frames with flexibility do better than heavy masonry without reinforcement. Road embankments that drained well deform but do not liquefy. Harbors with breakwaters that deflect the first fronts by minutes for evacuation. Communities that practiced leaving for higher ground move faster, even in the dark. Maps produced in the months that follow redraw the coast in inches and feet.
Benchmarks tell the story with a precision that looks clinical until paired with photographs of floor joists dipped in salt water and door handles now below high tide. Tree lines shift, marsh grass colonizes new lows, wharves sit high and useless above water that no longer reaches them. The economic picture forms slowly. Rail lines must be relaid. A runway that dropped at one end becomes a sawtooth that no landing gear can forgive. Fish plants wait for parts that will not arrive by road until a bridge is reset. Insurance adjusters learn new language for ground failure not caused by construction error. Relocation becomes policy in places where rebuilding on the same spot would invite the same ending. Anchors for this day remain open to inspection. Seismograms sit on paper in archives with station stamps that match global time. Tide gauge charts hold wave heights and intervals with pen lines still crisp. Surveyors' notes plot subsidence at Portage and uplift on Montague with numbers that match what the camera sees. Oral histories fill in sounds and choices, the run to the hill, the quiet after the roar, the inventory of neighbors made by shouting names.
2 lessons close this day. First, duration matters. A long quake does different damage than a short shock with the same peak. The ground can fail slowly, then suddenly, in cycles mirrored by the structures it holds. Second, coupling across systems matters as much as strength inside any one of them. A harbor, a rail spur, a fuel line, a power feed, and a road are not 5 assets. They are one system with 5 exposed surfaces. Morning brings a different map. Some towns sit lower, some higher. Some harbors are new traps for silt, some are new wind scoops for waves. Normal returns unevenly and learns new routes. But the record on paper and film fixes the sequence, so it can be read again whenever the ground is quiet and the calendar forgets what the clock remembers.
Next, a danger that arrived without wind or wave or ground motion. Not physics from outside, but a display inside a command room that said the sky itself was full of war. Chapter 3, 1979. NORAD, The Phantom War.
Cheyenne Mountain runs on routines and checklists. Consoles show maps, numbers, and confidence levels. The room practices alarm pathways with exercise tapes that mimic an attack. A maintenance step loads a training tape into an operational channel. The scenario contains a large first strike. Consoles draw inbound tracks as if launches occurred. Message circuits push warnings to command posts that trust this feed. Alerts cascade by design. Strategic command is notified. Bomber crews move toward aircraft. Missile units confirm status and wait for authenticated orders that never come. Airborne command platforms are readied. Every procedure assumes the display might be right. Cross-checks begin at once. Early warning radars that would see a real rise in returns report nothing. Infrared satellites that would watch the flame of boosters report nothing. Weather and comms paths are normal. Time passes in long minutes, measured in phone trees and challenge response codes. The stand-down begins when the pattern fails to match physics. No tracks on the sensors that matter. No launches from the places that would have to light up. The outbound message changes from warning to investigation. Readiness ratchets down. The display was lying with great confidence. The source is traced to the training tape.
Exercise data entered a live path without the block that should have kept it out. Displays did not label the feed as synthetic at every node. The warning network carried the picture it was given. Operators behaved as trained because the system told them to. The record that follows is technical and spare. Log lines show times of detection, notification, cross-check, and cancel. After action reports map where the process worked and where it did not. No launch sequence started. No weapon left the ground. The distance between false display and irreversible step was measured in procedures that held. Fixes are immediate and concrete. Hard gates separate exercise from operations. Synthetic data is tagged in a way that cannot be stripped by accident. Consoles show unmistakable overlays when training modes are active. Two independent confirmations become explicit before escalation. Audit trails make each handoff visible after the fact. The lesson is not about heroism. It is about design. A single point of failure should not dress rehearsal as war. False certainty must be forced to prove itself against independent sensors. The fastest path to catastrophe is a system that rewards speed over verification. The broader context matters. False alarms do not arrive alone in history. They tend to cluster when systems grow more complex and more coupled. Human operators remain the last circuit breaker when software agrees with itself. Day 3 ends without smoke or fire. Engines cool on the flight line. Phones return to routine. But the logs show how close the gears came to engaging. A nation that never saw a flash still spent real minutes in its shadow.
Next comes the part that looks forward. Across all 3 days, patterns repeat. Long reach, tight coupling, thin margins. The fixes are not dramatic, but they work when practiced. Chapter 4. Lessons. How nations disappear.
Lessons and synthesis. 3 vectors: Sun, Earth, human error. 3 patterns: long reach, tight coupling, thin margins. Length is vulnerability. Long conductors invite current. Coupling multiplies damage. Joints and interfaces fail first. False certainty is dangerous. Verification must outrun speed. Design principles that travel. Redundancy where one path cannot fail safely. Segmentation so faults die in small rooms, not whole buildings. Cross-checks across independent sensors before escalation. Analog fallbacks that do not share the same failure mode. Local autonomy with clear thresholds when links break. Duration readiness. Power, water, comms, for days, not hours. Label synthetic data so it can never impersonate the real feed. Time discipline. Synchronized clocks, preserved logs, auditable handoffs. Practice often. Drills turn knowledge into reflex. Postmortems in public. Lessons that are hidden are lessons lost. Translated to the 3 days. Telegraph fires argue for segmented, protected lines. Alaska argues for foundations tied to ground that will stay ground. NORAD argues for gates between rehearsal and war. None of this is glamorous. All of it works when rehearsed. Resilience is not luck. It is design plus repetition.
Fragility isn't fate. Good design expects failure and still delivers.
Drop your takeaway and what you would fix first below. Visit our Timeless Tales shop. Links are in the description.
Become a member for early chapters, behind the scenes, and polls.
And invite one friend who runs a system that matters.
Nations do not vanish in legend. They vanish in paperwork, in outages, in empty streets. 3 days sketched that shape. The record kept the hours, the witnesses kept the choices. Read the instruments, then weigh the stories. Next time, the ground opens in a different way. Secrets buried under Washington, D.C. See you there